I mean, the last point's really good, but maybe there's also another part of what you're saying, which is the recuperative line. So, and maybe computer technology is a good analogy to use. So, the idea that, instead of the military fighting hackers, why don't they actually recruit them and hire them, because don't they know the terrain? They're sort of natives in it. So, maybe we'll see a big pharma company like Pfizer offering artist residencies or something like that. And so this is like, this is this tired story of recuperation.
The question is,
right?
should they take those residencies?
Yeah, exactly. So the thing that the avant-garde's always had to deal with was recuperation, and this might be yet another kind of level that we see happening too.
I don't quite know how to word this, but it relates to a couple of the vectors in the conversation. But specifically, what you just said, Steve, is that the scientific community should look for a pluralistic or a popular or a democratic idea for how one would screen or understand the relationship between good science and bad science, or liberating science and not. And for those of us who've had long relationships with the nightmare of right-wing populism and how it functioned in particular in relationship to public art practice, I'm wondering if you could actually, in a kind of policy-making way, tell me how would that idea of the American false consensus really create interesting science? Because it didn't do anything for the art world.
I don't think it's going to create interesting science. What it is that it can hold it accountable, right? That, if we have any belief in kind of the ideal model of democracy and how accountability can work, right? I mean, it's only going to be through elected officials. I mean, certainly we can't let the corporations police themselves, which is what's been happening the past 8 years. I'm not saying that this is the way to make good science. It can happen, but it's the exception, not the rule, right? It can happen, but it's an exception. It's the way to keep an informed citizenry going, right? It's back to Walter Lippmann and bemoaning that, how can our citizenry ever be informed enough that with the many things we have to do in this complex division of labor, how could we ever keep up with it well enough? But, no.
Well, I would say that there are these, I'm not quite sure what the right term would be, but sort of a wiki-based science that's going on where large numbers of people, including the public, can be involved in a project, whether it's testing climate models or testing out different combinations of protein folding. Just your computer gets lashed into this giant network that's all solving these problems. And so it really is this huge process going on that you are a part of, looking for extraterrestrial life. Also, I mean, the dream of what some scientists call open source biology is that, if something bad happens, it's not going to be one lab off in one government bureau trying to deal with it, because they won't be able to. It'll be a decentralized network of people from a lot of different backgrounds who are working together to try to figure out the solution using some of these tools that they want to keep open, that they don't want to close off. That's what they say.
You can all feel free to introduce yourselves too when you speak.
Hi, I'm Steve Kaplan. I just introduced myself. Thanks. I was curious about, one of the things, Steve, that you had to encounter was how the public sector will defend itself against this sort of thing. But I think what we've seen on the internet and in cyberspace, or call it what you will, is how private interests will defend themselves. And since a lot of what happens in your field has to do with Frankenfoods and Monsanto and incredibly large multinational agricultural corporations, I'm wondering about the potential for them to defend themselves, and also how that would, resonate in the work. And I mean, has it happened to you or to anybody that you know? Because again, that's dealing not with the government, but with huge amounts of money, like insurance companies, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, yeah, they have all kinds of ways to defend themselves, although I think their most successful way, like when we were doing this project here, Monsanto, man, one day we were standing around the gallery and all of a sudden, as if we had stomped on an anthill and the angry army of ants were marching out, in come Monsanto's lawyers, and they're all over it. They're taking photographs, they're reading through everything. And, they're threatening us, they're telling us to cease and desist, and, they were really doing a performance of their own. There wasn't anything they could really do to us, and especially we were at the Corcoran at the time. It was a hard institution to attack, really. But, they certainly made their play, but if we look at other things like, the classic Percy Schmeiser case, which he actually finally won, that kind of went in his favor at last, after not going that way for a very long time, where, Monsanto was basically contaminating organic and traditional farmers' crops and seed banks and then suing them for stealing their product successfully, and using that as a means to intimidate and leverage more people, more farmers into buying their products. Yeah, so they have all kinds of things that they can do. If it's illegal to develop something in one country, you move it to another country. Yeah, they have the defenses, and like you were saying, just because of the sheer capital behind them, to try and take them on in some way, they will definitely fight back, and they have many, many tools to do it. And, all the way to, like with the oil companies and so, all the way to having their own private armies, right? Which we know from operations down in South America. So yeah, they'll defend themselves. They'll defend themselves with law, with bullet, the sword and the pen. They've got them both. And they'll come back at you. And they, yeah, certainly we've had our run-ins with corporate, and we've had our run-ins with almost every kind of authority you can think of, from the absurd up. We've had politicians attack us, clergy attack us, lawyers attack us, police, the FBI. Pretty much you name it. If you're going to go out into the public sphere and speak from a platform where people can hear you in some form of dissent, there's going to be a backlash. You don't get to do that for free. You have to be prepared to take what's going to come back at you. And if you're noisy enough, it will.
Hi. Biotech modern biotech at least, is a relatively young thing, and although law enforcement and public perception and regulation may not have caught up with it, there have been incidents where I believe people were able to artificially synthesize smallpox, for example, based on components of the genome that were mail-ordered. Have you noticed any sort of change in the means of regulation during the time that you've been paying attention to this? And is there a means by which it could be effectively safeguarded, these new avenues for biological research? Are there means by which it could be safeguarded without stifling innovation coming from a hobbyist market?
So George, in terms of where things stands in controlling this, I know that, what I'm familiar with is that these DNA synthesis companies, at this point, it's a pretty rudimentary process where they get an order for a gene. If it looks kind of funny, if it's a gene for a particularly nasty kind of protein and a pathogen, they might not accept the order. How much formal regulation is there now?